Hello everyone, welcome to High Performance Computing Advanced Scientific Computing course. This is lecture 13. We will talk about the transformer and application of fluid dynamics. The transformer is the variant from the attention mechanism, and we will go on detail in this lecture. Based on the outline, this is lecture 13, and we will have some practical in this lecture. Let's have a review on the lecture 12. In lecture 12, we had lattice Boltzmann and high performance computing. Regarding the lattice Boltzmann method, LBM, we talked about the scale scope since we have the two major macroscopic and microscopic scale, which microscopic focus on the continuous of the substance, and microscopic scale is focusing on the particle behavior. Between these two scales, there is a scale, it's called mesoscopic, which is based on the statistic of a particle. And from this statistic, we can derive the average and distribute probability distribution function to calculate the microscopic properties. We had a presentation about the microscopic scale and what the range of the calculation in this method, what feature we can extract, how is going about the scale and length scale. It's based on the element and volume of the flow, governing by partial differential equation PDEs, and we apply the numerical method and discretizing the mesh generation. It's the one of the most part work on this method to make the generation, and in some environment it's limited. After the presentation and talk about these different scale, we had a review on the history of the Boltzmann, the scientist who proposed the Boltzmann equation, and however he did not see the development of its application. Then we explained and determined the lattice Boltzmann equation, how the probability distribution function is working before the collision, after the collision, and the streaming, and there is some assumption regarding the external force. When it's zero, we can apply this assumption. If not, in the Boltzmann equation, we need to have an operator to solve this equation, which one of the most known operator is BGK, and we talk about its feature. Then we presented the comparison between the lattice Boltzmann method and Navier-Stokes, which is appears how we have a difference between this method, some advantage and some disadvantage. Then we talk about the two examples in the lattice Boltzmann method, one of them focusing to evaluating the performance with a specific processor when they're using MPI with the weak scaling, and another example was presenting the application of the lattice Boltzmann for a specific condition of the Reynolds number and the falling cylinder in the fluid environment. However, the lattice Boltzmann, it's ongoing research and its open area for the research. One of the limitation of the boundary layers to specify them in the domain of the problem. But from the recent application, it's providing a really good result and achievement, and hopefully its development will provide more successful solution on some limited problem in the traditional CFD. Let's carry on and back to our lecture. In this lecture, in first part, we'll talk about the attention mechanism and its properties, and then we will have a presentation of the transformer application in the fluid dynamics. Part 1 is attention mechanism. Let's start first part of this lecture to explain the attention mechanism, how it's connected to some psychology principles. Um, Usually, the human receive the information from the environment from some nerve or cues. For example, when inspecting the visual scene, our optic nerve receive information at order of 108 bytes per second. It's far exceeding what our brain can fully process. However, the human had learned from the experience which not all sensory input are created equal. Throughout human history, the capability of directing attention to only a fraction of information of interest has enabled our brain to allocate resources more smartly to survive, grow, and to socialize, such as detecting predators, prey, and mates. These we can say it's the basic idea and concept regarding the attention. So, if the human receive many information from the environment, we don't pay attention, or the attention is not equal, and it's we can say it's like from the experience the human learned from the history. The attention cues in the biology to explain how our attention is deployed in the visual world, a two-component framework has emerged and been pervasive. This idea dates back to William James in the 1890, who is considered the father of the American psychology. In this framework, subjects selectively direct the spotlight of attention using both the non-volitional cue and volitional cue. We will see in the next slide how these different cues embedded in the attention mechanism, and how we create a mathematical definition for this cue to apply them in the attention mechanism. Let's have a example how the non-volitional cue and volitional cue is working. In left hand side figure, we have these objects, the newspaper, paper, book, and notebooks. All of them same from paper. And we have this object, the cup of coffee with a red cup color, is has a distinct color and difference with other objects. If we're using non-volitional cue based off the silency, the attention is involuntarily directed to the coffee. This is the example of the non-volitional cue. In the another example, using the volitional cue, if we want to read a book, This is the example in the right hand side. We want to read a book. There is a newspaper, paper, notebook, and book. If we want to write a book, read a book, we will have attention directly to the book under volitional control. So this is something it's under our control with our decision, but this one it's non-volitional. Uh, this statement we can say using the volitional cue based on the variable selection criteria. This form of attention is more deliberate. It is also more powerful with the subject voluntary effort. Now we understand the volitional and non-volitional cue. Let's see how they are working in the attention mechanism. The inclusion of the volitional cue sets attention mechanism apart from those fully connected layer or pooling layer. In the context of attention mechanism, we refer to volitional cue as queries. Given any queries, attention mechanism bias selection over sensory input, which they are here. These sensory input are called values in the context of attention mechanism. More generally, every value is paired with key, which can be thought of as a non-volitional cue of that sensory input. As we can see in this figure, we can design attention pooling so that the given query can interact with keys, non-volitional case, which guided bias selection over values. But how this mechanism is working, in next slide we will have a diagram from this embedded system with this concept of the queues. Regarding the architecture of the attention mechanism, here is an example. Let's point to some important issues. In broad terms, attention is one of the components of the network architecture, and it is charged of the managing and quantifying the interdependence between the input and output elements. It's called general attention. Within the input element, it's called self-attention. So when we have some input, we need to manage and quantifying the interdependence, which could be sometimes sequence, and when it's going to the input as well, because sometimes in the output the place and the sequence is changing based of the these relation, we can say, between the input and output element. We have the general attention. Also between the input element there is attention, it's called self-attention. If we want to have example, which most application of the transformer started with the language or translation language, let's have example from this kind. Let's if we assume we have a sentence, how was your day, and we would like to translate it to French version. What the attention components of the network will do for each word in the output sentence is map the important and relevant words from the input sentence and assign higher weights to those words, enhancing the accuracy of the output prediction. So if we look here, we see, for example, we have 4 words in the English sentence, but in the French version we have 5. So this importance and the sequence provided by the attention and the weight to enhancing this accuracy. The attention mechanism basically it's a sequence to sequence model, or we call them encoder decoder. In the standard sequence to sequence model is generally unable to accurately process long input sequence, since only the last hidden state of the encoder recurrent neural network is used as a context vector for decoder. We point to this issue in the recurrent neural network because of the vanishing gradient. We cannot process the long input sequence, and with these issues, the long short-term memory (LSTM) born and it's deal with this problem. However, in the LSTM, when we have a long input sequence, it is capable to process them. However, it will be costly in the computing. But it seems there are some advantage in the attention mechanism. The attention mechanism directly addresses the long input sequence issue as it retain and utilizes all the hidden state of the input sequence during the decoding process. It does this by creating a unique mapping between each time step of the decoder input output to all the encoder hidden state. This means that for each output that the decoder makes, it has access to the entire input sequence and can selectively pick out specific elements from that sequence to produce the output. In this regard, the mechanism allows the model to focus and place more attention on the relevant parts of the input sequence as needed. So this is the difference of the processing sequence to sequence in the attention mechanism with the uh, recurrent neural network and how its advantage is working here. Attention mechanism has two main categories, uh, which is called Bahadano and long attention. Uh, while the underlying principle of attention are the same in these two types, their differences lie mainly in their architectures and computations, which make them different. As you can see, the architecture of these two different types has some differences, and we'll look on this. The first attention mechanism is Bahdana attention. As you can see here, it has a 6 step to process the data from encoder to decoder and provide the output. It's the first type of attention, commonly referred to as additive attention, which explain the less descriptive original name. The paper aimed to improve the sequence-to-sequence model in machine translation by aligning the decoder with the relevant input sentences and implementing attention. If we look on the structure here, we can see, for example, for these architecture with 3 output, how it's processed in the sequence and what the location for every decoder, because the position for the encoder and decoder is different with these two different attention, Bahdano and long. Here, the position is different and how it's leading after decoder to the output. And we will see the next structure in the next slide. The second type of the attention mechanism is long. attention, which is proposed by Long. It is often referred to as multiplicative attention, and it was built on top of the attention mechanism proposed by Bahdano. The two main differences between the long attention and Bahdano attention are the way that the alignment score is calculated, the position at which the attention mechanism is being introduced in the decoder. If we look on the architecture of the long attention here with the previous one, there is a difference for the position of the attention in the decoder. There are three types of alignment scoring function proposed in the long model compared to Bahdano. Also, the general structure of the attention decoder is different for long attention, as the context vector is only utilized after the RNN produce the output for that time step. After overview of these two type of the attention mechanism, let's uh, point to multi-attention and self-attention feature which is available in the attention mechanism. And here we have uh, a presentation of the convolutional neural network, recurrent neural network, and self-attention. Often we use the CNNs or RNNs to encode a sequence in deep learning. But with attention mechanism, imagine that we feed a sequence of tokens into attention pooling so that the same set of tokens act as queries, keys, and values. Especially, each query attends to all the key value pairs and generates one attention output. Since the queries, keys, and values come from the same place, these perform self-attention, which is also called inter-attention. So these feature of the self-attention make the power and capability of the attention mechanism uh, to predict or translate or make the output match in the sequence based on the input relation. Now we finish the first part of the lecture. We try to have a short review and description regarding the attention mechanism and the two main type of these mechanism. Recently, the literature mostly focused on the application of the transformer in the language translation and some music application. The capability provide a really good result. However, in some physics application, like fluid dynamic, still it's in the beginning, and there are not many application of these mechanism. One of the variant and next generation of the attention mechanism is transformers, which has some interesting feature, and its capability uh, has some evidence that could be used for data-driven data in fluid dynamic area. That means if we have some data as input, we can train the transformer to provide good prediction or forecasting for a specific feature. This capability useful in the fluid dynamics, and it could be applied in many different use cases. Um The attention mechanism has a many detail, and if you are interested, you can look on some references. These in the first part, we only presented these short description. In the second part of the lecture, we will talk a little bit about the transformers and its feature and how it's capable to apply in the fluid dynamics area. And then we will have example of its application in the fluid dynamics with some result from our recent study. In the end part of the this talk, there is a video is presenting the self-attention in deep learning, or we can say transformer. I suggest you watch this video, and it has a good visualization of the self-attention in the transfer and how it's working. Thank you, and we will carry on this lecture in the second part.